episode 97 of the podcast. This week we're talking about building on our handling skills by adding training, because handling skills and training skills are very different things. You're listening to the Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast. I'm Chrissy Newmeyer-Smith. I'm a certified professional groomer, a certified behavior consultant for canines, a certified professional dog trainer, and the owner of Happy Critters in Nashua, New Hampshire. And this, my friends and colleagues, is the podcast where grooming and training meet. What is the difference between animal handling skills and teaching some skills, teaching some training? And I'm going to say animal handling skills are when we know how to move around the dog, how to move the dog, how to use our tools on a dog who's having a problem, how to get the job done, how to calm them down. All of those things are super important, right? We're moving around the dog. We've got sharp instruments. We're trying to get an area while the dog is struggling. Those are all about handling. And that's what most of us as groomers work with. Most of us as groomers are trying to figure out how to get the trim pretty, like what new handling skills can we add to it. The problem I have with that is that while handling skills are super important, they don't necessarily address the problem. That's a way to work around the problem. That's a way to help the dog maybe feel better in the moment, but you're not really teaching them anything, or you're not teaching them to be better. So you might be teaching them to hate it even more. So they're always learning. But I want you to be thinking about adding training to your handling, adding training to your mad skills at keeping a dog under control enough to be able to get the job done. When you add training to that, then you can start building the dog that you want. You can start teaching them that, hey, by the way, this is okay. This is safe, and this is how we behave. Handling skills aren't about, and this is how we behave. Handling skills are about, and this is how I'm going to get it done despite what you're doing. And the difference is pretty big, because when we talk about a dog who's going to live to be 15, when we talk about, well, I usually say 15. I think that's a good range for, the average dog. That's our expectation and our hope at this point, is that they're going to be living to about 15. If they get groomed once a month, every 2 months, that's a lot of grooming time, right? This isn't something that's never going to happen again, okay? Handling skills alone are when, maybe you have to do something in an emergency, something that's not likely to happen again. Handling skills are for when there's something happening and you just need to calm them down, probably medical, So for instance, right now, one of my guys injured his tail. I think it was a bug bite. If he gets a bug bite, it turns into a big hot spot, big open place where he's been ripping fur, right? And right now it's on his tail, right? I'm doing animal handling with that. But we also have this background of, I have been training you. I have been training you all along to understand what I'm doing and that it's safe. So when I get to that tail, am I going to spend a long time teaching him that this is how we put medication on your tail? Yeah, not really. I can spend a little bit of time doing it, but not really. I'm using the skills he already knows, which is good because he already knows some skills. So the difference between animal handling and adding some training is that training is looking to the future. And we don't have to do a whole lot of training in a grooming session to make a difference. So when we add training, I want you to be thinking about the dog who's being really, really silly and wiggly. If we are so used to handling that dog, managing that dog, working around the silly and the wiggly, then it probably feels like we're not wasting time. It probably feels like we're being pretty effective because it's the way we've done it and it feels familiar and we don't have to overthink it. But when we add training to that, sometimes that feels like it's taking longer. Like, okay, well, let's work over here. While he's good, give him a break. Work on something else. Now go back to his head. Do a little bit while he's being good. Stop, move on to something else. Those little breaks are training. Those little breaks are when he's good, remove the challenge. right? Give him a break while he's good. That's training. That's a training technique. It's actually referred to as negative reinforcement if and only if you do see that the behavior continues or increases, right? So that being good, you have to have a definition in your head before you just give him a break. If you give him a break every time he wiggles, you're also teaching him to wiggle. Be thinking about this while we're working, because if we add training, it feels like, oh, I can't just keep going circling back on this dog's head. I can't keep going circling back. That's going to take too long. But if I set a timer, and I've done this before, the time it takes to do a dog who's really fighting you versus the time it takes to do a dog and keep circling back and giving them breaks and adding some training, it's about the same amount of time. But, and here's the exciting part, but at the end of that grooming session, the dog you've been managing, that you've been working around, isn't any better. And the other one that you've been helping to calm down is better and improves during that session for future sessions. So the same amount of time spent, but better in the future. And again, 15-year commitment for a dog, right? So even if you're not going to be their groomer that entire time, someone's going to be grooming that dog for that dog's entire life. So be thinking about that as the influence we have during that grooming session. Yes, it's not the straight through, get it done. And it's important to have a system when you're grooming. I agree. I mean, I like to just get in there and just do the things in order, and get everything done straight through, no nonsense. But the dog's already given us nonsense. So we have to work around that. And training is the workaround. Training is an excellent workaround. We're still using our handling skills, but now we're just using them in a mindful way. We are applying some training principles to help this dog be better, so that in the future, maybe 2 or 3 groomings from now, you can go in and just do your regular stuff. Wait a minute. Did you just say 2 or 3 groomings from now? Yeah, 2 or 3 groomings from now. You could go in and just do your regular stuff. You could do whatever order you usually do. And that's not every dog. I mean, certainly behavior is so individual. Who knows which dog is going to behave in which way, and how fast they're going to learn. But what we're building is we're building trust. We're starting to tell them what's happening and adding training instead of just working around the problem. So while working around the problem is important, my real goal is for you guys to break away from the idea of how do I get this dog done, and to turn it into how do I get this dog to let me get this done and be good for this for the future. Huge shift in the way you think about it. It's a huge shift. We're adding training to it now. And that doesn't have to be just us adding training. And that doesn't have to be like a whole training session. I think people kind of forget that you can add training principles to something smaller. You don't have to full on go, I guess we're doing a training session with this one, like stop all work. So here is an example, a pretty common one. If I have a dog who we know is nervous about something. First of all, you should assume, if it's a new dog to you, assume that there's something they have problems with. Just assume it, save some time, because they're going to have a problem with something. So just be watching for when they lose their calm, comfortable, and cooperative, right? Be aware so that you can say, oh, hey, that's the part that we need to work on. The moment I started this is when they lost their calm, comfortable, and cooperative, right? But when I work with a dog, let's say he has a problem with their head, doesn't like getting his head done, right? I start there. And I don't start there and just blow through it start to finish. I start there because then I can circle back through the entire grooming. I have the whole grooming session to keep circling back to that head. Why? Why do I need to do it in one lump? Why? It doesn't make any sense to me. And I see it all the time, like, now we got to do the head, and we're just going to crank at this until it's done. Like, we don't need to do that. You literally have lots of other things you could be doing. So let's describe how that might look, how that might feel, how that might proceed. So, all right, that might be while the dog is in the tub, I get into the corner of his eyes, right? And that might just be with a finger. Let's see, how are you with the corner of your eye? Let's do it in the tub. Let's get some comb in. Let's get a comb. Let's get scissors. Maybe the bravura. I mean, I don't like using them in the tub, but if a dog is going to have a big problem and there's some reason why it's worth it for me to, risk my bravura. But and for trainers and non-groomers, the bravura is one of those trimmers that has a blade with 5 settings. It's a really nice little clipper. So yeah, sometimes I'll just get in there with that. But I'm thinking ahead to just doing little bits. And the beginning of a grooming session is when they have the most patience. How much patience does that dog have? The dog already has issues with grooming, so I don't think he's I can handle things for 2 hours kind of guy. Let's think about that ahead of time and start working in his comfort zone, working with what he can handle. So, same dog has problems, right? Some of those dogs, I will go through and scissor parts of their head while they're wet, right? I use an absorber towel after the bath and get as much crud, as much water off of that dog as I can. And guys, the absorber towels, so I've been using these since the late 90s. They aren't new. I'm glad they finally found their way into the grooming world, because I've been shouting it to the world and no one's been listening for a long time. But ladies and gentlemen, please, 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 after you use an absorber towel on one dog, put it through the wash and hang it to dry. I keep hearing stories about oh yeah, we have all these absorbers and we're putting them in a bucket and we keep them wet like that in vinegar or something. No, just wash them. And something the size of a face cloth can, absorb so much water off of a dog that it still saves you so many towels. So many towels. So I'm house call. I bring something the size of a face cloth, right? And it's dried like a brick. So you hang it to dry and it's already folded. Anyway, I use an absorber towel. I get all that water off. I get them on the table. I start up a dryer, I don't just put it on their head. I start up that noise while I'm toweling their head, while I'm brushing through their head. Think about the steps that you can add. The way you can break it down. And in between these things, I keep going back to the rest of the dog's body. I don't have to do the head in one step. And getting the head done in one step is probably what got this dog started on hating it. Sometimes grooming is really unpleasant, and then a groomer or an owner or maybe the vet or a vet tech thinks, well, we can't have that behavior, can we? And just pushes it and pushes it and pushes it. And that is not helpful. It accidentally creates the very behavior we don't want, right? The dog's not trying to give you a hard time. The dog is having a hard time. The dog isn't being dominant, right? The dog is trying to escape. The dog is trying to get you to back off. But that's not being dominant, right? We need to get out of some of these 1980s views on how dogs behave. The dog's having a hard time. Let's look at it at face value. Yeah, he doesn't like that. He's not trying to take over the world. We can't read too much more into it. Look at the behavior in front of you. The behavior you see in front of you. And if it really, really bothers him, let's build to get him to like it, to think that it's okay, to think that it's safe. Maybe he's never going to love it, but we can help him think that it's safe. If you're enjoying this podcast, please remember to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes, and tell all of your friends. Same dog, same head example. I want you to be thinking about all of the tools that we can employ to help a dog be more comfortable with something. So some of the things that I can list in here too, I mentioned the absorber towel as a way to reduce the amount of drying time. right? If the dog's not comfortable with the dryer, or maybe the dog's fairly comfortable with the dryer but doesn't really like much, think about all of the tools that we have that we can use to help the dog be more comfortable. So in the tub, that might be something that keeps him from slipping around, right? That could be as simple as a rubber mat in the bottom of a tub. That could be a nice paw mat on the table. Another product I really like is paw mat. But yoga mats work too, just that they get ripped up real quick and they are not particularly easy to disinfect and clean. They're porous, like paw mats are different. But something with better footing can change a dog. All of these little things that we can do, happy hoodies. You know what? For a dog who's worried about their head, some dogs do well with a happy hoodie. Some dogs think the happy hoodie is a little bit terrifying. Read the dog. Decide what that dog wants. But if you're using something like a happy hoodie, that might tell you what the dog was afraid of is noise versus the feeling of someone playing with my ears or someone going near my eyes, right? Find out what that dog is worried about. And that's where we gather our clues. And again, this is where we take it beyond just handling, beyond getting through the process and put into training, right? We don't want to just get them through it. I don't want to tell you like, oh, and you hold them this way and that way, even if they flare, they can't get you. And you can just get the clipper in here like this. And by the way, this is some nice angulation, I want to get more into, hey, this is how we calm them down. This is how we help them through it. And then in the future, we get into, hey, and this is how you can hold your clippers in here, and this is how you can get some really nice angulation, because now this dog is normal. Now this dog can handle it. How nice is that? The dog can handle it. So the paw mat, something under their feet, you can use the happy hoodie. I love the dryer brushes. Oh, if you guys aren't familiar yet with the dryer brushes, I have the Petom, I think that's what you call it. Anyway, basically it's a hairdryer with a little brush on it. They're really pretty quiet. There are a couple of different versions. I've worked with 2 different versions. They each have their own thing, They have some heat. You can add heat. Ooh, which we know heat will dry a little bit faster. So if you're talking about a dog who's nervous and you just need a little bit of quieter, or you need them to be just a little bit faster, a lot of dogs will do well with the dryer brush. I mean, I still prefer to get in there with the high velocity dryer, even if it's with the nozzle off and really straighten hair that way. But these dryer brushes are pretty cool. And I'll post it on the Facebook group and the Facebook page later on today. I'll get those up as some of the products that I like to use. But the other thing is they're fairly quiet. And I think they're only like $40. Like, oh my God, I bought it wondering if it was going to be a useful tool. And hey, look, what do you know? It is. So now you've got a couple of different ways you can be thinking about, am I going to get this dog's head dry? If it's a dog who literally cannot handle the dryer yet, it's okay. Because you know what? You can still work on that. You can work on having the dryer near them. The calmness of the dryer heading up their shoulder. Work on calm. If you're doing it right, when you're working on calm, it's about as interesting as watching grass grow. So one of the things that I see is people wait until the dog has a problem and then calm them down again. I want you to do this and stop while the dog's being great. And it's going to feel wrong. It's going to feel like a big waste of time, because that's not what we're used to doing. But if you're doing it right, it's about as interesting as watching paint dry. It is not uncommon for someone to come over and watch me groom and say, yeah, but he didn't give you a hard time. I'm pretty sure I could get his head like totally done. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not going to risk it, because we made such behavioral progress today that I don't care if we edge his ears. Like there are just some times where I'm like, we made such good progress today that I don't care if the grooming is fantastic. And they're like, but he's being so good, you could just do it. And I'm like, every time we push and we push them to the point where they're afraid, it backfires on us. We have the opportunity to make it look like it's effortless. And what is the dog learning? Huh, I didn't freak out, right? And I know, freak out, there's a very, very technical term, right? But I want you to think about every time a dog becomes afraid, their body responds to that, right? That's a chemical reaction in your body. Fear, gets your heart beating, lungs breathing faster, your heart's beating faster. All of that energy is going into your muscles to get you out of there or get people away from you, right? The brain stops getting information. The brain's like, yeah, obviously we're not taking care of it. Body, get us out of here, How about the body just take over, right? It's a stress response. And that stress response, that chemical release, that epinephrine, do you remember that? Do you remember adrenaline? Do you remember fight or flight, right? That response, cortisol levels, right? That response can last for hours to days. It doesn't just go away because we're like, see, it didn't hurt, right? Like that doesn't work that way. So if we can set up a grooming session where we're like, I'm just going to keep circling back and keep you in your comfort zone. We're actually training them to like it. We're training them to put up with it at least, but we're teaching them like, hey, this thing didn't hurt you. This thing wasn't necessarily scary. Oh no. So working around and around and around and giving breaks, like I said, that's negative reinforcement. The best reward we can give a dog who's having trouble being groomed is to back off. It's the biggest reward we have. We know in grooming that many, many dogs wouldn't take a treat if we offered it, right? Which would be positive reinforcement, like adding a treat to tell them like, hey, continue that behavior. That behavior earned you something, right? If we wanted them to continue a behavior and we're like, hey, good job, and, like give them a break. Yeah, that's a powerful reward. It works. But what do we as groomers do? We're in animal handling mode. We're like, oh, he's finally still. And we just keep going, right? We wait until that dog starts to wrestle with us. We wait. And we don't know we're doing it. We're just like, doo-doo-doo-doo, I finally get to do my job. Every time the dog is still, we're like, doo-doo-doo-doo, I'm doing my job. Dog's finally still, right? We wait for that dog to start wrestling with us. And I'm trying to shout it to the mountaintops. Hey, guys, don't do it that way if you're trying to train him to like it. You're going to circle back. And then because it feels like it's a waste of time, you should probably put on a timer. You should probably time yourself as you circle back, just so that you know what? I really did take about the same amount of time that this dog takes me. And you will probably find the dog is calmer at the end. The dog's doing okay, shows some improvement, and you got more done. You'll probably get more done by giving them lots of little breaks. Now, when I first started doing this in grooming, because, I was taught grooming the way most of us were taught grooming, and like, well, you get in there and you get it done, and, this is how you hold them if they start to flail, and this is how you can put your clippers on them without hurting themselves while they flail. I was taught that way too. When I started adding this way of doing things, I had to have a notebook out to remind myself, like, I did 2 nails on the left back foot. If that's as far as I got in that one part and I moved on to something else, I just had a notebook to write it down. 2 nails, left back foot. And then when I'd circle back, all right, left back foot done. Right back foot nails. Like whatever it is, I had to just like write down the thing that I just kept circling back to. So I didn't forget a dew claw or an entire paw, and it's going to feel like chaos. But what's familiar to us will always feel like it's easier. And even if it isn't. I'm going to give you an example. People who are used to driving one particular way to work, right? You drive this route all the time, and someone teaches you a shortcut through town. Well, maybe it doesn't feel like a shortcut yet because there are lots of twists and turns, right? You're like, oh, there's so much to remember. But it does save you 10 minutes, If it saves you 10 minutes on your regular drive by going through some back roads, but there are so many turns that you're convinced that no, this can't possibly be a time saver. There's just so much to remember. There are just so many variables. There are just so many turns until you literally look and go, oh, that saved me 10 minutes. Because what is familiar is on autopilot. We don't have to think about it. So for me, at this point in my career, giving dogs little breaks is on autopilot. I don't even have to think about that. If I have a dog's front paw in my hand, and I open my hand, because I'm always like opening my palm to check and see if they're still hanging out by choice, right? Like, okay, are you in my palm because I've got a good grip? Or are you in my palm because you're resting in there? Like, I open my palm all the time. And you know what? Most of the dogs are just resting there. They aren't trying to pull away when I open my palm, give them a chance to move. But that's on autopilot for me now. And if they do move, I'm like, okay, do you need a little break? How can I work on this? That's autopilot. I don't even think about it anymore. So I want you to be thinking about adding training to your handling skills, and to start recognizing when someone is helping you with handling skills or when someone is helping you train a dog to be better, right? Because sometimes I'm hearing things like, well, and if you do it this way and they'll eventually calm down. I think sometimes we're hearing they'll eventually calm down as, in my experience, when I handle them this way, sometimes they just give up their life. I don't want them to give up their life. I don't want them to think there's no escape. Like, we can do better than that, right? We can do better than have them think like there's no escape anyway. I'm caught in a bear trap and there's no way out, right? That's handling, right? And I want you to start recognizing, because handling is important. Not going to downplay handling. Handling is really important because we still need to be able to work around these dogs. We still need to be able to read them. We still need to know how our attitude influences them, which is another part of behavior problems, is that you have to not take it personally. You have to be in this mindset of, hey, this dog's having a hard time, and let me help him out. And that's good handling as well as good training. So a lot of these things overlap. Like, hey, how can I help this dog out? Because he's obviously having a hard time, but it's not personal. Even though it seems very, very personal, but it's not personal. So I know I gave you a bunch of things this week, but some of those products, like I said, I'll list those on the Facebook page and on the Facebook group, which, by the way, is a way to get you guys to join the page, join the group. And right now, here we are in September of 2020. This Friday, I'm speaking at Groom Expo, which of course is online, but I'm speaking at Groom Expo. I'm on the schedule for Friday at 3 o'clock, and I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully some of you guys are there to listen. Have a great week and stay curious. If you'd like more information, you can find me at Chrissy@happycritters.net, happycrittersdogtraining.com, or you can join the Facebook group, Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast, or the Facebook page, Creating Great Grooming Dogs. I really look forward to hearing from you.